What surprises can we expect? Any surprises?
I think the biggest surprise is we've done a lot of work getting the audience to expect a showdown in the streets of Defiance and driving out the E-Rep, and we're not going there at all. This is much more about the world coming together because of what's happening globally, and we're going to be tying the end game of the season is going to tie into what the Votans did when they first arrived, and how they planned on dealing with the human problem on planet Earth, which otherwise was a very idyllic paradise if it weren't for all the people that already were on the planet.
Will there be any more backstory?
Yeah, we're gonna do a little jumping into the past, and that's something that there's a rather in season 3. I want to actually do quite a lot in the past because that's something that we've talked about, and I always plan on doing it, and it always ends up falling out because we have to build new sets for it, or it ends up being that we only have it's a real frustration only having 42 minutes because there's so many characters and there's so much story that you want to have like that premium cable an hour has 60 minutes instead of 42 because there's always like great things that end up not fitting into our 7-day schedule.
Any of the characters far off from what you planned them to be at this point?
Sure. I planned Pottinger to be dead, and I discovered that Jim Murray has an infinite capacity to be likable and compelling no matter what you have him do. Like he truly does. He does the worst, most toxic, horrible crap, and somehow you still kind of like him. And it's that same special gift that Jamie and Tony have as actors. They're so compelling and they're so engaging that no matter what they do, you still sort of love them. And that's one of the things that I've discovered is one of the charming things about the show is all of these characters really do bad things. Like even Nolan, he's our hero, but he honestly is the world's worst sheriff. It's like back in season 1 when he strongly suspected that either Kenya or Amanda had killed Hunter Bell. He whitewashed the entire investigation because he didn't want to find them guilty. Same thing this year is when he realized that Rafe may have been or one of the miners may have been complicit in that death. He wiped the Gulani or the Gulanite dust off the body and doctored evidence. And that's one of the things that's frustrating. That's awful. But at the same time, you still like him because his heart's in the right place.
Now the Tar family's kind of gone through a huge change this year, and it seems like it's still in flux.
It's good. Yeah, it's going to remain in flux, and now we've sort of entered my favorite phase of the season, which is Daytak is the divorced dad who realized he's made a horrible, horrible mistake, and he wants his family back, he wants his life back, and he can't quite figure out how to do it because he's so emotionally tone deaf that fixing his family is something that he's not equipped to do. And I think that it makes, again, he's a character who's utterly despicable. I mean, he shot Connor Lang in cold blood last year. He's done so many horrible, horrible things, yet at the same time, I feel for him. Like when I see him sitting in his little hovel and the scenes where that he has with Doc Ewell, Tony is able to break my heart. And even though I've seen the scenes a zillion times, I still feel a little lump when he has that scene with Doc Ewell and he realizes that I may have gone too far this time.
Yeah, even in the prison, there was times where I was just this guy's despicable, yet I'm feeling sorry for him.
Going back to sort of your question, is one of the things that I really didn't expect was Daytak and Doc Ewell had very little screen time together last year. And one of the things we tried to do this year was the characters who didn't get a lot of play, to give them more play. So we really kind of built up Jesse Rath's character. We really tried to darken and make Julie's character more interesting and more complicated. And we tried to put people together who hadn't been together. And one of those instances was Daytak and Ewell. And clearly from moment one, Trenna Keating and Tony Kern were built to be a vaudeville comedy team, and their timing is so perfect together. They're so brittle, they're so fantastic, and one of the big surprises was I didn't quite understand until I actually saw them do a scene together. how much chemistry those two would have. And so we really we're doing a lot with them for the balance of the season, and it's every scene they have together is great. We also discovered Linda Hamilton just has chemistry with the walls. There's no character that you can put her with that is not stunning and compelling and horrifying at the same time, because she's so sad and broken and brittle that you're afraid that she's going to break, but then she scares the piss out of me. And it's like scene after scene after scene.
What has been your favorite scene up to this point?
Gotta say I'm partial to Stama and Rafe in the bath. I am really, really partial to a scene you haven't seen yet, which is in episode 11, and it's Daytak and actually it's in the finale. It's Daytak and Stama sitting down with Pilar for the first time and having an argument about Pilar wants to be with her daughter, and Stama and Daytak have other ideas because Christy is part of their family now. But that's when you see the scene.
Yeah.
You know, there's you're talking about the bass thing. There's a certain amount of sexuality going on in the show.
Do you think?
Yeah, exactly. Does sci-fi ever go like, this is too much? No.
An interesting thing happened was we did a sneak preview for last week's broadcast, and it was the scene with Daytak chopping the handmaiden and making her say Stama's name over and over and over again. And the word came back from Sci-Fi that the scene was too racy and we couldn't air it an hour later in the 9 p.m. time slot during Dominion, but it was okay to have it in the actual show itself. So I feel that Sci-Fi is a wonderful network because they let us push the edge, and as opposed to a broadcast network where when they say no because they're answering to corporate masters, there's a lot more wiggle room. And if I can make an argument that something is essential for the show, they let us get away with it. This is actually, there's a couple of instances for the first time we use the expletive shit in a couple episodes. Normally we go like, bullstock or stocko, but there's some places where it just sounds like a fake word. Like most of the time Frack worked on Battlestar Galactica, but occasionally you just felt like you wanted someone to say fuck. And there were a couple of key moments emotionally where we actually say that word, and because I could argue it was essential to the story, they let us say it. And I think it's, I think the answer is yes, we're pushing the boundary, and it's a luxury that they allow us to.
Any game crossovers?
Yeah, we're sending one of our big characters is going into the game, and I can't tell you which one because I don't know if Tryon has announced which character is, but it's one of our, other than Nolan, it's someone you've never seen in the game before. That's a big deal. We're doing our contest winner crossover is happening, which is very exciting, and it's. I think we weren't sure how much we're going to use, so she has a small presence in the season, but we've kind of set her up to come back next year. We hired a terrific actress to play her, so I think that'll be cool. And then there's a lot of little in and outs as we get into the end game, which, when I mentioned before, it goes global. That's going to affect what happens in the game, what's happening, and basically Arissa's actions will begin to have a huge consequence on the rest of the world, and that will include the video game.
What has fan reaction been to this whole interactivity between the game and the show?
I think the fans have been really hungry for more, and I think that I find myself mostly in the position of wanting there to be more interaction and just going up against the fact that our timetable is so radically different from the timetable of the game, because the game is making decisions a few weeks out from a launch. We make all our decisions like 6 months before we actually air, and as a result, when something changes for the game, we wrapped photography last December. There's nothing we can do to sort of work with it, and I think in an ideal universe, the game and the show would be on more convergent timetables. So I think it's a challenge. We're committed to making the crossovers as meaningful as we can, but there's certain logistical hurdles that we try to improve upon incrementally.
So do you have an explosive season finale planned for us?
Oh, pretty big, yeah. It's quite a tour de force for Gary Hutzel and his VFX team. I'm really impressed with what they managed to accomplish in our last 2 episodes. And it's kind of cool that because Dominion had fewer episodes, we're going to be airing new episodes in our regular time slot and the Dominion time slot for the last couple. And it's going to make the finale is going to run continuously, and it'll feel more like a 2-hour event as opposed to 2. And I think that's great because I always feel that 42 minutes I want a little more show, so I think the last couple you're going to get a little more show.
It was cool. It was cool that you were able to show other cities this year too.
We're going to get a pretty decent look at one more city before we're done this season.
Was it great to kind of
It's New York. We'll see
New York, but
yeah.
wasn't it great to kind of deconstruct them a little bit, and show them in where?
Well, we had to ask a lot of questions, like how much did they keep and how much didn't they keep. And for what we did with New York is we decided that New York was spared the terraforming, so it has a very, very different look because you don't have. Manhattan Island is largely intact, but there's wind farms. Some buildings have been destroyed because of the war. There's new towers that have gone up, and when you see a big shot of it, New Jersey's toast, man. The state of my boyhood, that's all terraformed and crazy and desolate and barren, and it's quite jarring to look at familiar New York, and then when you look across the Hudson, it's alien world. So it's a very different approach than Chicago had, or St. Louis, obviously. Or LA.
I'm so glad I moved from Hoboken to New York City.
I don't know. Hopefully I grew up in South Jersey, so hopefully that was spared.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think
do you like the most?
That's such a hard question. Right now I'm really enjoying Pottinger because the depths of depravity and the level of and the way that he can be interesting and compelling is really wonderful. But Daytek and Stama are always my favorite scenes to write, and when we sort of figure out who's doing what scenes, I will usually hog those scenes for myself to make sure that I'm doing it. And I enjoy the byplay with Tony and Jamie, but I also, anytime Nolan and Arissa are together, that's the heart and soul of the show. Like, that relationship is so much, back to when they were singing the stupid Johnny Cash song, in the pilot. It's Paper Moon was sort of my original inspiration that got me excited about doing the show. Was the two Ryan and Tatum O'Neal drifters.
Which character do you think will have the widest arc, the most extreme arc?
Daytek and Stama rarely change. I think Arissa has had a huge arc because Arissa grew up as a human girl, and she grew up believing. I promise it'll be the last one. And she grew up believing that she was a human being, and because of her relationship with Sukar and the other spirit riders, she began to come in touch with her own Arathianness. And I think that as we see, I don't want to spoil where we're going, but as we see the influence that Irzu is having on her, I think there is a question: where does Irzu's influence end and Arissa's own self-will begin? And I think that some of the terrible things that she does as we get into the back half of the season, it certainly does beg the question: does Arissa hate humans, and does she wish that she were more Arathian, and how does that relate to her dad? Does she hate the fact that her father tried to turn her into a human? So I think that's probably the biggest arc of any of the characters.
It's still very sympathetic.
And I think anyone who's been uprooted, the immigrant experience, if you've been taught to hate where it is you come from, and then you go back to the homeland. A lot of people, that I've talked to have had that experience where they've grown up American and they go back to where they come from or where the people come from, and it's and they have very, very complicated emotions about it. And I think digging into that is really, really interesting.